Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Richard Skipper celebrates the best in entertainment. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. Today, we are going to be celebrating the legacy of Mike Renzi. Now, I never got the opportunity to work with Mike Renzi, but I will say this about him. He was a true mensch. No matter where I saw him, if I was in a club or wherever I was, if he saw me, he would cross the room to say hello. He left us on September 28th, but today I've reached out to some of the people who got the chance to work with him. And this gentleman right here, Nicolas King, Nicolas and Mike got all of us through COVID. They put their shows together, they came together, and I don't even feel that I have the right to be the person to lead this group today. But a few weeks ago, someone reached out to me and said, would you do a show celebrating Mike Renzi? And the first person I reached out to was Nicolas. And I said, Nicolas, should I do this? And Nicolas said, yes. I said, are you available? Let's pick a date and a time. Today was the date we picked. And I reached out to some of his greatest friends and colleagues. They stepped up to the plate, and we are here today. And they're going to pop in and say a few words. But I want to start with you, Nicolas. First of all, you've known Mike Renzi your entire life. How did you two meet?
It's basically my entire life. I met him at Christie's restaurant in Newport, Rhode Island, which was a mainstay for many years, and they were closing. And that night happened to be the Big Bash, and who showed up but fresh from his apartment in Manhattan? He had just sold his place in Manhattan, and he moved back to Middletown, Rhode Island. And it was Mike, and he sat in, and there was a buzz in the room that the Sesame Street guy was back. You know, Mike, of course, being the musical director for Sesame Street for 12 years and winning Emmys for it. And there was a buzz in the air. You know, it was exciting enough that we were all celebrating Newport, but he was there, and I got up and sang.
Now, how old were you?
I was 16.
Okay.
And of course, I knew Mike knew of him from all the records that I had, because I was a sort of an album file. Is that a word? I collected all those records, Peggy Lee and Tormé. So I was very familiar with him, and I was very intimidated to have him in the room, because everyone made such a big fuss of him. And of course, he hated a fuss. So naturally, he was, very much just.
Well, Mike, we're going to make a fuss about you today.
Yeah, get over it. We all went out for pizza afterwards. And the thing that struck me the most was we were all eating pizza. And it's about 3:00 in the morning at this point. And this jukebox, and we put on Sinatra's Strangers in the Night record. And the first track on that, of course, is On a Clear Day, which Mike and I from across the table both insisted was the best tempo for that song to be done as that swing. And together, as we're eating pizza in between, bites, he, like myself, knew every note to that arrangement, every organ lick, every drum fill, every string line, every horn hit. And I thought I was the only one that knew that stuff, because I was a very odd 16-year-old who loved all that stuff. And for the first time in my life, I sat across the table from somebody who was doing what I was doing and got every nuance and understood it, spoke my language. And that you could say, I guess, was it. But I think the thing that when I think we really clicked was when we had a dinner at my grandmother, Angela Beccari's house about 2 weeks later.
Uh-huh.
And after dinner, he got over to the piano, and mind you, I don't know him very well, and he sits and he starts to play dum, boom, 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 boom. I know that song. That's Where's Love. So I start singing it, And apropos of nothing, I don't know where this came from, Richard. This was one of the moments in my life that I can never explain. Some call it supernatural, some call it chemistry, whatever you want to call it. I call it special, where as soon as it was done and we sang it as if we'd done it forever, he modulated and I just naturally went into, if I expected love, blame it on my youth. And he looked at me and he went, how did you know I was going to play that? And I said, how did you know I was going to sing that? And I think that moment, it was within the first 2 weeks of knowing him, kind of perfectly encapsulates what we had, which, a lot of people have told me, and I have always felt that we share the same brain in similar ways in terms of phrasing, in terms of pacing, so I learned that from very early on, that we could have that sort of connection, that phrasing where I didn't have to think twice about it. It was like breathing in and out, and it just was so easy. But from that first time at the pizza place, and it was something so crazy. And I just thought, God, what is this? This is something so special,
Well, I consider it a gift because I have absolutely no frame of reference when it comes to a person's age. Everyone, whether you like it or not, we're the same age. So there was no age gap between you and Mike Renzi.
Not musically.
What was it about the connection between you and Mike that musical connection was so strong between the two of you? And how many years together did you actually make music together?
So there was a 50-year age gap, and I thought about that one. Wow, but I've always gone along with adults. I'm an only child. And so it was never difficult for me to strike up conversation. Plus I'm working since I'm a kid, so I'm used to adults, but with that connection, it was, I think it's because I have such an appreciation for things of yesteryear. I was never the typical kid who listened to top 20 of my generation. I know those songs, but they never did it for me. So I knew about Cole Porter and about Eleanor Powell and, Buster Keaton and random people that, and specifically musically, I knew all those songs, and I like to learn the verses, I like to learn where they came from, the movie that they came from. I had an appreciation for it from very, very early on, that I think with Mike, it was just easy because we would talk about this stuff. I go, yeah, and that's from that movie. And do you know the verse? And it was like a kindred spirit in that sense, that I think we matched on that level in terms of appreciation and for good lyrics. And this is that's one of the things that kept Mike and I so close when it came to selecting material. If the lyrics didn't hit us, there's certain songs that we've heard and we play. I won't name them so as not to offend anybody, but we go, oh, why do people keep singing that? So inane, But you find these songs, these Bergman songs, or those Legrand songs, or those Cole Porter songs, or those special moments in a song that we connected on, in terms of lyrically and what it did to us. And we could sit and listen, and we did, to Shirley Horn's albums. You pick it, any Shirley Horn record. And Mike and I would sit either in the car, or if we were driving to a gig, or in our living room, and just be sobbing because we just connected to those lyrics, and they told us that we felt them the same way. We felt lyrics the same way. And I think that maybe that's something that he appreciated. I don't know. I can only imagine that he appreciated it the way that I did, because like I said, it was very difficult for me to find people that understood it the same way that I did. And I didn't expect it.
And how soon after that first meeting did the professional relationship begin?
Very quickly. Actually, he said to me on his way out, he goes, Nicholas, if you ever need someone to play for you, I'll play for you. And I thought, ain't no way, this guy's full of it, So I called his bluff. I had a little job that was offered to me at a restaurant. This is so embarrassing. It was from 7 to 11, 5 hours, 5-hour gigs, which are a thing of the past, thank goodness. It paid $100. They didn't even feed us. We got like one free drink, $100, and he had to bring his own piano. And I was gutsy. I was 16. I was gutsy. And I said, Mike, I got this job. I don't know. You said, do you want to come? And he went, sure, I'll be there. And he came. And I have to tell you, it's as simple as this. He never left my side from that point forward. We played a bunch of local gigs. And then at some point, at about 3 or 4 months in, he went, Nicholas, we got to get you back to New York. You have to do this material. No, this Rhode Island bar scene is not for you. We need to get you to New York. We got to get you an act. We got to put you in the room. And we did our first show when I was 17 at the Metropolitan Room. And I was, I had Jay Leonhart and Buddy Williams and Mike Renzi. And I thought, oh my God, what is this life? So it was really soon after, but it was not difficult to fall into that habit very, very quickly.
And how soon did you begin to learn about the history of Mike Renzi?
I kind of always knew a little bit about it, but Mike was always so modest that Mike never talked about it. He would throw out little things. Oh, that's what Peggy used to love, or Tormé used to do. He'd throw out little nuggets here or there, but you kind of had to draw it out of him. He'd never talked about it as freely. And at any chance I got, I would talk to him about it and say, because I've just fanboy over all the people that he played, the people that I listened to, Maureen and Eartha Kitt and Jack Jones. And, I wanted all those stories. But it would be like pulling teeth to get them out of him. But if you got a couple martinis and if you were lucky, he might give you some stories. So I did a lot of my own research, Richard.
Well,
I went on YouTube. I did a lot of my own stuff to find out about him, because he wasn't always forthright with, to him, he was always forward motion. He never really looked back.
Someone who has written about him is James Gavin.
Yes.
And I'm going to bring James Gavin on. I know that he's moving back into place right now. I wanted to mention his name so that he was in place, so that I could bring him on. James, thank you for being here today. I reached out to James because he wrote such a beautiful piece the other day. It wasn't an obituary as much as it was a love letter to Mike Renzi and his incredible legacy. You've also written incredible books on Peggy Lee and Lena Horne that he's had the pleasure of working with. James, thank you for being here. If you can talk about the musicality of Mike Renzi and what made Mike Renzi so wonderful, and so many wonderful jazz singers, some that we're going to be meeting in a few minutes, wanting to work with him.
Thanks for inviting me to do this, Richard. I loved that guy. From the age of about 11 or 12, when I was frantically looking for records, I fell in love with records. I fell in love with voices. I especially fell in love with the voices of classic pop singers and jazz singers. And in the mid to late 70s, say, there was not that much around on record. This was before CDs. It was before the age of the reissue, and albums of this sort, the kind that Mike played on throughout his entire life, were not easy to come by. And I would go to New York City, and I would go down to the old 42nd Street and go to King Carroll Records, which you remember, and they had a big bin or two of the kind of albums that Rex Reed would write about in his New York Daily News column, which is one of the places I began seeing the name Mike Renzi. And I knew immediately that Mike was associated with creme de la creme singers. And I wanted to in on that. I wanted to be a New York sophisticate, and I wanted to appreciate and understand and be familiar with all of those people that the smart people knew about. And Mike Renzi's name was linked with a lot of them. I became aware of his playing probably through the Mel Tormé and Friends Live at Marty's double album, which came out, Nicholas, what was that, 79, 80 perhaps?
Yes.
Thereabouts. And I heard there were a lot of wonderful accompanists around, and then there was Mike Renzi, because Mike had an exquisite touch that was all his own. He had this beautiful, billowy, rolling quality that swung, but that also went off on beautiful impressionistic flights of fancy underneath a singer. And it created a kind of a floating bed that singers shone upon. And it occurred to me that many of the singers that Mike worked with had never sounded so good as they did with Mike. And that Mike was doing more than accompanying. He was never getting in the way, but he was helping singers to fly, and at the right moments in a track, beautiful things that he was doing would catch my ear. They were not done in a show-offy way. They were done because it was gorgeous decoration for what a singer was doing. It mirrored and anticipated what a singer was doing. And although I'm not a musician and I'm not a singer, you didn't have to be to get this quality of Mike's. Mm-hmm. So anything that Mike Renzi's name was on, I knew had to be good. It was just a hallmark of quality. And in 1985, I was still a bit of a wee lad then, but I went to the ballroom to see Peggy Lee, and my host was the great Bart Howard. Bart Howard was going not only because
I was there.
Were you really? It was a magical night. It was Peggy's return to nightclub performing after a number of years away. And Mike knew that, Bart knew that Mike and Peggy were going to perform Fly Me to the Moon. And Peggy is the singer that Bart credited with having gotten Fly Me to the Moon off the ground, so to speak, in the early 60s. So Peggy sang her ballad version of Fly Me to the Moon, and Mike played a solo that I get goosebumps when I think about to this day. And it literally brought Bart to tears. And so we went back into the dressing room, which was easy to do at the ballroom. As you remember, it was stage right, and you walked through a black curtain, and there was a black door, and you could knock on it or waltz right in, and believe me, I did. And there was Miss Lee seated, and there was Mike Renzi standing. And I said hello to Mike, and I was a kid. I was a college boy. I wasn't anything except a lover of this music. And Mike was so sweet to me. He was, as Nicholas has pointed out, he was so marvelously humble. He knew what he could do. He knew he had a sense of what he didn't do as well as what he did do great. But his ego, he had what I would call a very healthy ego. He didn't have to ever make a big deal out of it. His work spoke for itself, and Mike's marvelous quality that, again, Nicholas has pointed out, of making a singer feel at ease and making a singer know that he or she was, that no matter what happened, Mike had your back. I saw him do this countless times with any singer I ever heard him play with. I saw him from that point on with Maureen and with Sylvia and with Jane, whom we're about to speak with, Jane Schechter.
Speaking of which, let me bring Jane on. That's a perfect
please do.
To bring Jane. What a great way to bring her on.
Hi, Jane.
Jane Schechter.
Yeah.
Jump in.
I just really want to comment real fast about Nicholas, because he did something that made me love him so much. And anyone who ever sang with Mike playing had those moments where you'd be singing and he played something so fabulous. You'd look at him, you'd look at the piano because you couldn't believe what you just heard. And there were so many times on those Wednesdays that Nicholas was singing with Mike where Mike would take a solo and Nicholas would pop his head in front of the camera like, do you believe what he just played? It was so gorgeous. So, I mean, I saw those moments in your face when you too were taken up with the beauty with which he played. Am I speaking now, or James continue?
Well, Jane, I'd like you to elaborate upon what James was just talking about. I mean, the way that he supported a singer. I mean, I have this great photograph that you sent me. Just look at all of you.
Look at
yes, and you look the same. You look
the same. Oh, bless you.
That's the dream team right there.
That's right there.
Dream team.
Grady was amazing. In 2018, Mike emailed me. I was afraid that Mike emailed me that he just was listening to the record we did in '87, and it was going to be our 30th anniversary. And I said, wow, maybe we should do a reunion show. And Mike said, I'm in, see if Jay's in. So I emailed Jay. He said, go for it. I got in touch with Johnny, and he booked us immediately. So we did the 30th reunion of doing I've Got My Standards. The title came from my darling writer husband. Anyway, and we also turned it into a tribute for Grady. Vito Lechek played drums with Jay and Mike, and we told stories about Grady and about Jim Zak from NOLA Studios. And then we did it the next year, and we called it I've Still Got My Standards. And we also did songs from Double Standards, which was the one we did in 1993, which that was the picture you just showed. But I have to tell you, I heard Mike in 1975 at Town Hall playing for Sylvia Sims. And I went, oh my God, I've never heard anyone play chords like that and voicings like that. So I look him up in the phone book and he's not there. And that's because Mike hadn't moved to New York until 76. And then I went out to LA 1976 for a while. And when I came back in 1984, Mickey Leonard, who I'd met out in LA, Mickey, who wrote Why Did I Choose You When I'm All Smiles, and from that wonderful show, The Yearling, yes. Mickey gave me 2 sessions with Mike as a birthday present.
Wow.
And here's the certificate. You can't see it really, but anyway, it says I'm entitled to 2 sessions with Michael Renzi with his address and everything. And so I called him, and it took a little bit to see him. It took about a month or so, but once we worked together, that was it. We were together for 12 years, and I would go all the time to his apartment on West 73rd, just behind the Dakota. And anyone who was ever there knows you couldn't find a place to sit on that big brown couch. You had to move all the albums. There were no CDs. You had to move all the albums to sit down. And anyone who saw Mike up close saw how beautiful his hands were, and the placement. It must have been his classical training, but the way his fingers were on the piano. And I said to him, Mike, you have the most beautiful hands and fingers. You could be a model. And he said, oh, yeah, wait till you see this. And he takes off his shoes and socks to show me his feet. He says, they're just as nice. And crazy. Is that crazy? So, and I wanted to tell you one quick story. When I was looking for piano, Mike went with me with the sales guy from Beethoven Pianos to 135th Street, 136 in the Bronx, and it was like a football field filled with Steinways and Bosendorfers, and Mike picked out this piano for me, which I have now, Mason Hamlin. But he was like a kid in a candy shop. He played every single Steinway and Bosendorfer as far as the eye could see. He played a little bit on each one. He went running up the aisle, playing all those pianos. So, and it was just special. He would write charts for me in pencil. I don't know if you can see it. It was like hen scratching. I mean,
wow.
I mean, and I have over 40 of his arrangements for me. And some of them he wrote out like, yeah, exactly. And for anyone else to read them, Ted Firth can read them. If someone can read a Renzi chart, they're good. But there's only one Renzi with those chords and those voicings. Yeah.
Yes.
Just to add you, Jane, I've just started the project of trying to now digitize all of Mike's charts, because like yourself, all I have are his handwritten ones, which are fabulous, and I want to save them forever. But over the years, he would write them in a hurry. He would write them sometimes during sound check or rehearsal, so they're missing some bars or they're not always complete. Yeah. And at the gig, he would just go, "Oh, you guys know what to do," and so it's writing all over it. So I've begun the process as of this week to start digitizing them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can see it says Sigma notes. I mean, this is not exactly serious chart paper.
Well, I want to bring on our next guest here. I want to bring on Richard Glazier here. Richard, I'm so thrilled that you're here today. I want to ask you, I mean, do you know if there, and maybe James can answer this as well. How would you even go about archiving all of his arrangements and charts?
Well, it's like you have somebody like Nicholas trying to digitize them, and Jane has the charts, and there are holes in them. And and in the holes with Nicholas and Jane, they know his style so well that they can work with another maybe arranger to tell them maybe what Mike would do to kind of clue them in to get those bars filled in, if you will, to kind of come close to Mike Renzi, because nobody's going to touch Mike Renzi. I mean, he was the master. He was the best. We can clearly say that. I talked to James a few weeks ago, like a day or two after after our beloved Mike passed away. And you said something, James, that really touched me, and I agree with. That CD between himself and Maureen McGovern that he made in the back room of a showroom in Los Angeles, of a piano and her voice singing like "Once Upon a Time" and "My Ship," it's one of the greatest CDs of that genre ever made. Sound-wise, it is just absolute perfection. The piano is so gorgeous because you see, I'm a trained classical pianist, and Mike was as well, but he went off into the jazz, I went off into the classical, and we had these wonderful discussions because I first became aware of Mike Renzi when I heard him collaborate on television in 1981. Do you remember those series of television shows that Charles Strauss and Burton Lane hosted these shows, and there was a young girl by the name of Debbie Shapiro on the show saluting Charles Strauss, and Mike Renzi was playing the piano for him, and he's on the show, and my ears perked up, and of course Debbie Shapiro has become, but we all know, Debbie Gravitt. So and it just that's how I've heard him. I just noticed him there in 1981, and then I went to Carnegie Hall and heard him. Do you remember that MGM tribute that was done in the mid '90s that George Feltenstein put together at at Turner Classic, Turner Movies?
I was there for
everybody
that
was there.
well.
Yeah, Mickey Rooney and
Jerry Moran, yes.
Jerry Marin. Oh, everybody. What's her name? Catherine Grayson and Tony Martin and Sid Charisse and Vic Damone. And there's Mike on the stage. He is the pianist, and Larry Blank is the music director. And I knew Larry, and I reached out to Larry, and then I went up to the stage at intermission. There was Mike, and that's like when we first met. And it was just like you say, Nick, just kind of a connection, because you see, Mike loved, he adored, he was inspired by people like Conrad Salinger at MGM. He would constantly talk about Conrad Salinger, those voicings, those orchestrations, the instrumentation. It sounded like Ravel and this is what he was inspired by. He was inspired by the orchestra of the MGM musicals. He was inspired by all of those great conductors, and specifically talking about Conrad Salinger all the time. And he was inspired. That's how he had that gorgeous piano sound. My God, a piano sound that it was just unbelievable. And I would play arrangements for him, and he'd play arrangements for me. And it was such a wonderful love fest of music when we got together. And then he got to see me when I played at Newport Music Festival, and we had this most wonderful time just talking about music. And I introduced him and just admired him and was inspired by him, by that gorgeous piano sound. Where did he get, like Jane was talking about, this sound it was like velvet. And I want to say also about Nicholas. We saw Mike and Nicholas do the show in Orinda, California. And it was the first time that we'd heard Nick. And my wife and I, Jan, were so moved and blown away by your talent, Nick, and that collaboration. You were so wonderful, and you entertained the audiences so beautiful. We were so overjoyed. We left in this fabulous mood, and all these songs. We're kindred. We're all kindred spirits here. That's what we are. Nick is talking about when he's 16 years old, and he knows these songs, and he liked it's the same story for me. I'm sure it's the same story for James. It's the same story for you. I mean, this is what draws us in, and Mike brought that out because he represented that. He represented that beauty that we bathed in that beauty. And the wonderful thing about Nick also is, you talked about the age difference, and this came to mind, in the age difference between this beautiful collaboration between Nick and Mike. Mike played, one of the things that Mike loved and why he played for Nick, and he told me this personally, is because of and it was so obvious on the stage too, and when Nick entertains, it's sincere, it's real, it's not fake, it's not phony, it's real. And he gave Mike the respect that he deserved on and off the stage all the time. And even though the Mike didn't have a huge, he didn't talk about himself a lot, this is one of the things that he admired about you, the fact that you showed him that respect. That meant a tremendous amount to him, that respect you showed, and you never forgot it. And we talked about that. And he said that, why do you think I play for him and work for him? Because he's he shows me this great respect, and he's so talented, and he shows me the respect. And I said, yes, he shows you the respect that you deserve, Mike. And so that, it was just wonderful. I feel so lucky to have known him and have touched my life. And because he's touched my life, you guys are touching my life right now, and we're getting to talk about him and celebrate him. And that's what it's all about, for goodness sake.
That's what it's about. And we have 3 phenomenal singers waiting in the wings. I'm going to bring on Sandy Stewart, who...
oh my gosh. What a fan. What a fan. Do I love Sandy
everybody.
Stewart. Oh, that album, that Gershwin album with you and your son is spine chilling.
Sandy, we are getting a little feedback here on you. Do you have any other devices open?
Yes, I do. I do.
So,
I have a Bose speaker that I'm listening to you on.
Yeah, we'll turn that off because we're getting
Turn it off?
feedback. Yes.
Okay. It's off. Now can you hear me?
I can still hear you, but we're still getting a little feedback.
All right, wait a minute. Oh, I'm so technically brilliant.
Well, you're brilliant in other ways as well.
Okay. How is that?
Well, we're still getting feedback.
You are. I have a mic on. Oh, I hate wasting this time. I want to talk about Mike.
Do you want to deal with that? We can bring you back on in a few minutes.
I don't know what I'm doing. See, that's the problem.
Okay. Do you want to turn the Bose mic off?
If I do that, will you be able to hear me? I don't know.
We'll find out.
I don't know. How is that?
Okay.
Is it better?
You just talk and I'll shut up.
All right. Let me tell you how I made the best chicken pot pie, because that's what Mike and I would do. We would call each other up. I've known Mike 50 years. The laughs that we had with Zach at NOLA were just unbelievable. Forget the music. We would talk about martinis, what to put. He would call me and say, Sandala, I have an olive that I discovered that's stuffed with orange rind that we can put in our martinis when we see each other. And because Zach and Mike and I, we liked our martinis. And of course, with the Boston accent or the Rhode Island accent, the martini. Anyway, I miss him so much that it's beyond belief. We did some of the most wonderful, thrilling concerts with the Bergmans when we were introducing their songs that no one had ever heard yet. And Mike, of course, it was like having a big fat cushion around you, especially, Jane, what it is to be a singer and to have a piano player that just encompasses you. And you know that every breath you take, he's with you. Every word that you say, he knows the lyric. Yes. And my son Bill, when he was a kid, 12 years old, I took him to see Mike when he was playing for Peggy. And I said, I want you to listen to the way he plays for her. And he learned a lot from that night. And he adored Mike, and Mike vice versa. And Mike used to say to me, I can't play like that, kid. Are you kidding? What, are you kidding me? You're the master. You're the master. And I'm just lucky I'm surrounded by the best accompanists that ever lived, that ever was with a singer. And I thank Sylvia Sims for all this, because she used to bring her laundry over to my apartment, and one day she came over and said, "Hey, Sandy, I have a new guy. He's from Rhode Island. He can play everything. He knows all the tunes." She says, "You ought to hire him if you need a piano player." And that's when it started, in the mid-'70s. And of course, Mike and I were attached at the hip at that point. Like you, Jane, like Maureen, like anyone that worked with him. He was devoted at that moment. It was a Zen experience. At that moment, if he's working for you, that's it. That's it. Nobody else counted. No matter what the gig was, no matter what it paid, he just wanted to play. And his favorite thing in the world was to play for singers. And Bill is that kind of accompanist. He knows all the lyrics. He listens to the singer. He just knows. And the guy that helped him with all that knowledge is Mike.
That's wonderful. I'm going to mute your mic, but I'm going to come back to you. So hold on. And I'm going to bring Cynthia Crane on, one of my favorite singers. Cynthia, thank you for being here today. Cynthia, how many CDs did you and Mike record together?
5 of my 10.
Oh, wow. And how did the collaboration between you and Mike begin?
Well, the very first CD I ever made, after the one with Marshall Barer, which was a group effort with Feinstein and a lot of people. But the first one was The Secret Life of a Wasp. Remember?
Yes, I have it.
Absolutely. I got it.
Well, after that, Mike got it from Michael Feinstein or Tony Monti, I've forgotten which. And we collaborated on the Christmas album. And it was just, I've been haunted day and night thinking about him. It's a week now since my mouth dropped open. And I mean, last week was a bruiser because I lost our partner at the Impossible Ragtime Theater. He died at 74. And then the wonderful Doris Deether, at least she was 92. But Mike, oh dear. And I've just had so many memories. The dog playing ball in his hallway, and being late one day after we finished rehearsal. I'd forgotten something. I went back, and there he was working for the lost chord on Ill Wind, Oh, he loved those chords, and he did have all that classical background as well. And Nicholas, this generation's Mel Tormé, what a gift to have you together.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
And Jane's wonderful CDs, and James Gavin, you wrote the most beautiful pieces.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know if you got my email, but I did comment on it. And Sandy Stewart, all my life you've been.
Yes, Cynthia.
Idols with that gorgeous low voice of yours.
Cynthia.
So anyway, also I was thinking about NOLA recording studio. So many of my memories are there. We all used to hang out, and the wonderful musicians that would hang out too. Oh dear, and Jim Zach. It's hard, all of these people leaving us. Thank God for the music.
Thank God for the music. But Cynthia, you mentioned one word that resonates so loud for me, and that's collaboration. Can you talk about the collaboration, the process of how you and Mike chose the songs that you chose for those CDs, because they're brilliant?
Well, that's one way I hooked him, because I chose the songs. Mm-hmm. Nicholas knows I gave him my favorite textbook. I gave it to Jim Zach. His son Stephen just sent me a picture of my inscription to his dad, and that is the great song Thesaurus. I just love that book, and I learned so much about songs I did know and songs I didn't know. For example, I've got one coming in my head that's driving me crazy, and as long as I have this captive audience, It's an Irving Berlin. And it's not in the book, Nicholas. I couldn't find it. Here comes the freedom train. You better hurry down. Just like a Paul Revere, it's heading into your hometown. One more. Inside the freedom train, you'll find a precious freight. Sweet words of liberty, the documents that made us great. And there's about 6 verses. Irving Berlin. Anyway.
Wow, that's great. Thank you.
Someone.
Thank you. And I'm going to bring on our final guest, and that's the incredible Anne Phillips. And I'm so thrilled that she is joining us today as well, as she can get up on camera. Anne Phillips, yes. And how did your collaboration with Mike begin?
Well, it started very early. I remember when these guys from Rhode Island came in town. I can't remember who else it was, but and I remember meeting Mike. Now, he wasn't one of the piano players that played for demos, because I had done demos for songwriters like Burt Bacharach and Carole King and all that stuff. But I'd written a song that I wanted a demo on myself. And of course, I called Mike. And it was a funny recording session, because I called Mike, but I thought it was a swinging little thing and I ought to have a bass player too. So it was a bass player that had been begging me to use him sometime. And so I thought, okay, this is a simple little demo. I'll use him on this. And we went into, I think, Associated. Anybody remember that studio? And yes, wonderful demo studio. And well, it really wasn't working with the two of them. And finally, Mike was so sweet. He didn't hurt anybody's feelings. He just said, Annie, let me just run one with you. And so no tracks, no second takes or anything. We did one together. And that was it. And it was a song that I'd written, not for just my kids, but kids all over the world, called Have You Ever Heard a Song?
Just heard
it. You heard it? Well, in the verse, it says, the records of today are wonders of technology, but all what's on them songs, I think they owe us an apology. So that gives you the idea of what the song was about. But Mike was so incredible. There was no way in the world I needed a bass player. I mean, I'm sure it would have been a different story if Jay Leonhart had been there.
Well, I reached out to Jay, and I thought he was going to be here today. I'm sure that he's playing a gig somewhere today. I want to go around and I want to ask each of you a question. I want to give our viewers a sense of what he brought to each of you and the life lessons that you learned from him. And I'll start with you, Nicholas. What you've learned from him that you will carry through for the rest of your life, both as an artist and as a human being, that you will carry through. As I said earlier, I unfortunately never had the opportunity to work with him, but I will never forget, no matter where I was, if he saw me anywhere, he made his way across the room to say hello to me. And that was something that I never took for granted. It was always there that he always came over to say, hello, Richard. And that meant the world to me, that he took the time to say hello. What did you learn from him as an artist and as a man?
I know it sounds a little cliche, but I'm going to use his quote, his favorite quote, and it was his email address, but it had a lot of meanings. It was no bad chords. And we all know that was his phrase. But a few times he expounded on it to me about what he felt that meant to him personally. It meant two things. One, of course, musically, don't ever take the easy way out. Find something that's going to stir the heartstrings. Do it right. Don't just get through it. Do it right and do it good. And don't take shortcuts. Don't cheat. Don't play a simple 1-3-5. Find a way to make it different and unique from your point of view, and really do it good. Do a good job. But he also said it meant for him what it in life no bad chords. And for him, that meant his relationships, the way he lived life. You know, he didn't, you know, and all of you guys know this too. He was very particular about certain things, whether it was olives, whether it was a way to voice a chord, whether it was his favorite restaurant. He was so particular. I remember one time I made a Cosmo for him, and the only thing I had was diet cranberry juice. He spit it out. He goes, nope. So particular about the things that he liked because, and not to get silly, but down to his toilet paper that he liked to have in his house. One time, whoever shopped for his house used that one-ply toilet paper, and he thought he was going to have a fit. But I say that to illustrate a point that, you know, Mike lived that way in the sense that there were no shortcuts. There were no easy way out. Do it good. Do a good job. You know, really do a good job. Really be kind and be generous. You know, he felt that the more positive he was, the more generous he was, and the more good chords, quote unquote, he could use, the more the universe or God would bless him. And I thought that was such a marvelous way of looking at life. And I remember telling him one day, one of the things I loved about working with him the most, I said, Mike, because when you play, you're all heart. Mm. You know, you don't play clinically. You don't play, you know, sometimes, you know, you get these sterile chords that don't mean anything. But he played with all heart. And that was the only time he hated compliments, hated them. But if I said that to him, he would always say, you know what? Thank you. That means a lot. And I think that to me goes to the lesson that I learned, which is no bad chords. So don't choose the easy songs necessarily. Or if you're going to choose an easy song, don't do it easily. Find a way to make it different. Find a way to make it special, unique, and as a home run. Really, everything has to be a home run. There's no such thing as mediocrity. And in life, the same way. Don't settle for less. Don't settle for anything less than magnificent. And I think that meaning, that no bad chords, it's a double meaning, you know, and I love that he explained it, you know, and I think that's something that I will always want to take with me. Always look at it from the point of view of heart. You know, how can I move, you know, someone with this song or this lyric, you know, or what is the meaning behind it? Where's the heart? And whether that's on stage or off stage, that's something that Mike gave me that I will never, ever lose, I hope.
That's great. Jane?
Well, I used to say when I was working with him, the thing that he really listened. I mean, I used to say I could stop, a la Shirley Horn, walk around the block, and he'd be waiting for me to come back in. He really listened to what you were doing. And one of the greatest things, and I realized he did this because I was listening to something that I had sent you with Mike singing. I got Mike to sing on stage with me. Was that if you did something that he liked, you'd hear him go, and I realized how much hearing him go, yeah, that you really got him at that moment. That was really precious. Just a very special relationship. He played the little play. He played Daddy's Skylight. He played 88s. And the two CDs we did were just forever. And I'm so glad we got to honor those at Birdland recently. And so it was great having rehearsals at his house in Rhode Island. It was worth the ride. He was always worth the ride. That's for sure.
Great. Richard?
Well, I didn't know Mike as on such a personal level as all of you did. Our relationship was kind of through being a musician and going to each other's concerts. But I want to echo what Nick said. I mean, it's basically everything about sincerity, about love, about, you know, even though he didn't sing the songs, he emulated the whole idea was the synthesis between his piano and the voice to make this wonderful unit of emulating this gorgeous synthesis between the human voice and the piano, you know, and the voicings that he came up with, and the piano sound was it's impressionistic, reminiscent of Debussy or Ravel. He loved that. He loved being told that, and that's what I've learned from him, is to try to emulate that incredible sound. We used to talk about Bill Sandy, because he loved the way that I play the Cy Walter transcriptions, because I play them all. And I've recorded them, I've played them, and he just absolutely adored the way that I played Body and Soul, and I cover the waterfront, you know, the Park Avenue Art Tatum. and I play a lot of Bill's transcriptions too. I've recorded a few of them, and even though, and it's so interesting when you look at Bill Charlap and you look at Mike Renzi, two of the giants of the genre, they're very different, and that's such a great thing. I mean, Mike Renzi, his chordal structure was so lush and so tasteful, and when Bill accompanies, it's the same, but it's much sparser. His textures, his harmonic motion is not as fast as Mike Renzi's is, but they're both great in their own right, and I learn from that, and I'm inspired by that, and hopefully I can bring that attitude that Nick is talking about of being your best, trying your best, not settling for mediocrity like these giants, and like all of you here. None of you settle for mediocrity. Jim wouldn't have those great books. Richard doesn't have this show. Nick wouldn't have the career. Sandy wouldn't, and Cynthia and Jay. I mean, if you settle for mediocrity, you can't. And these people inspired us not to settle for mediocrity. And I think of that every day when I go to the piano, and when I play the Cy Walter transcriptions. And I was very dear friends with Hugh Martin. He was a very close friend of mine. And he liked the playing of Mike Renzi. We used to listen to recordings with Mike all the time, and he paid me the ultimate compliment. He said, Richard, he said, I love to listen to you play just by yourself because you sing through your fingers. I can hear the lyrics just with your hands, and that's the thing that I've covered. That Hugh Martin gave, and it's just the intersection of all of these wonderful people that create the unique souls that we all are in our lives, that touch us all, of these different wonderful people that inspires us. And Mike Renzi is at the top.
Richard Skipper, can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
I just want to say, everybody, please forgive me for fading in and out. I am now the principal caregiver for my darling husband of 57 years.
Oh, my.
He is not having a great day. And so I have to keep checking, and I keep disappearing, and I'm so rude, I can't stand myself. So I beg your pardon, all of you, because I adore Mike, and I miss him so much. Anybody who ever sang with him also fell in love. I mean, there was that. You couldn't resist the man. He was such fun. I used to take him to the Friars all the time before Madoff struck me. And he was the ultimate perfectionist on all things. And they knew him. Everybody in the club could see him coming, all the staff, and they waited on him and adored him the way I did. And he and Jim Zach, many memories. So anyway, thank you for giving us all this opportunity to talk about him. Because it's occurred to me one more thing, that I've had a wonderful life with my husband, 2 daughters and 2 grandsons, and I have nothing to complain about. And other than my family, which is the greatest joy of my life, the happiest moments that I can ever remember were working with Mike.
Oh, that's
It was such a joy to see his process of working, and he'd hear a chord, and I always think of him, the lost chord, Anyway, I miss him, and I love you all, and I think I would like to check out. So I can get back to
Thank you for being here.
It's so good to see you. She and I went to the same boarding school, different centuries, but in the Duffy School for Girls.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Sandy?
Am I still vibrating?
Yes.
Nicholas, one of the highlights of my life was the last gig that we did together with Mike. That was February 1st, right a month before, I hear the echo, sorry. A month before the pandemic hit. It was so special. I loved singing with you. You're so wonderful, and you're carrying the torch for the old folks like me. I love that you love the tunes. I love that you sing the hell out of them, and I will miss Mike forever. Of course, he was the best, and he left us great gifts by working with him and knowing him and making, as he said, the best chicken pot pie I ever ate when he came to my house. I miss you, Mike, and I love you guys.
Thank you. Thank you. And
Well, I think the story I told about the session I did with Mike is the best way I can express about his musicality and his wonderful, loving sweetness. Because, as anybody knows, when somebody isn't making it on a session, it could turn ugly. And it didn't. He handled it so well that there were no hurt feelings. But I did get the record I needed. And I didn't need a bass player at all. That with Mike, it was just spectacular. And more recently, I used him as an accompanist to a student of mine, Michelle Samuels, and we had a wonderful time, a whole afternoon of hearing him accompany again. Just beautiful. So I feel like I've known him from the beginning to close to the end.
thank you. James, I'm going to give you the final word today, but wait for just a moment before that. I want to thank everyone for being here today. I'm sure I can speak for all of our guests when I say this. We don't take it lightly that you could have been anywhere else for the last hour. So thank you for spending an hour with all of us. Thank you, Mike, for all the gifts that you gave to the world and that you will continue to give through your music, your legacy. Thank God that we have those recordings and that we can go and listen to them at any time. And I truly believe that as long as we listen to the music, as long as we think about him, as long as he's in our hearts, he's still here. Yeah. And I always like to think of him as being in the next room. He's having his martini, he's having an olive, he's eating a chicken pot pie. He's just in the next room, everyone. And truly believe that. I also end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list and reach out to the 9th name on the list and reach out with a phone call, not an email message, not a text message, not a private inbox message, a phone call, and let that person know what they mean to you. Because as my dear friend David Friedman says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. And I always say, if you're going to be out in a boat, make sure that you bring a skipper along. So, I'm going to take all of us off screen. James, you're eloquent. You know the right words. I'm going to let you say the final words today, and I'm going to let you take us home. And don't worry, I'll know when to end the show. Thank you.
Thank you for those wise words, Richard. I often wondered through the years why Mike didn't play solo piano more. He could have. He made one album in the late 80s. That's a beautiful record. And I asked him about it from time to time, and he conveyed to me the fact that he just didn't really care. He was devoted to the art of accompaniment as a full-time job. He wrote arrangements, he did musical direction, he conducted a little bit, but the relationship between a pianist and a singer was sacred to him. He devoted everything in his heart and in his talent to wrapping himself around the human voice. And you hear that when you play, you hear his, as everyone has conveyed today so beautifully, you hear his complete attention. Subservience is not the word that I want to use because Mike's presence was stronger than that. But he placed singers on a very sacred pedestal. And because of that, the relationship he had between piano and a human voice, there was something almost spiritual about it that touches my heart very much. It puts me in a place that other accompanists do not. And if I've made it all sound terribly serious, I had some of the greatest laughs, the most fun, the most irreverence with Mike. He was salty, and he was if he trusted you, he really let you know his opinions about things, and he had them, but he was not unkind. And there was simply, I think he was the very best at what he did, and what a standard for us all to aspire to, no matter what we try to do.